Okay, next news topic, and yes, it's time for the panel switch out. John and Oliver have departed, and joining me, Alex Battaglia. Hello.
Hey, I love the idea of them departing,
Yes.
like they're dead. They're departed.
They'll be back, don't worry. We've got a few topics to get through, Alex, so I guess we should just crack on. Let's begin with God of War Ragnarok. It's been patched again, and I'm assuming you've got comments about it.
Yes, so this is now, I believe, patch 6, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, when God of War Ragnarok launched, I thought it was a good enough release that most people would load up and not have issues with it. But I had a number of smaller scale issues that had to do with the game not being graphical parity with the PlayStation 5 version due to bugs, as well as a couple of performance hiccups depending upon your setup. But they didn't affect all setups universally. It was just like specific areas of the game and or specific CPU combinations. So patch 6 looks to be adding more fixes in. The previous patches fixed up issues with tessellation performance that they actually chalk up to driver changes in their patch notes, which is interesting. They also looked at fixing the problems with the game's displaying of fog that I pointed out in my previous video, which is apparently an NVIDIA only issue that was around at launch. And then a couple other smaller scale things. But I would say the biggest scale one that happened as of this patch, patch 6, is that Zen 2 performance is fixed. And now I have heard that essentially when we talked to them and they did an interview, they mentioned how they looked at scaling CPU load based upon where caches are in the CPU. So keeping things in cache as much as possible and avoiding going across to different cores or smaller cores that would have separate or worse caches. And they basically traversing that distance to do inter-core communication and slowing the entire process down. Now that worked really well for modern Intel and it worked really well for modern Zen. But if you go back to Zen 1 and Zen 2, where things were slower, that inter-core communication was even slower than it is in modern Zen. It didn't work. Essentially, their scheme didn't work, and it would limit the game to using far fewer threads, hardware and logical threads, than it possibly could have. And it led to really bad performance. If you go back to my original video there, you'll see like the 5600X is beating the Ryzen 5 3600 by like a little bit more than 100% or so, which is ridiculous and unheard of. And, that Ryzen 5 3600 is usually a great analog for the PlayStation 5 CPU in a lot of our tests. Not the exact same, but it gets there in the performance usually. And it was like dropping into the 40s mid-combat, and that was not right. So as of this patch, I've measured a 40% improvement, taking this area that is like the 50s into the 70s, just via patching. And the core spread is now much like you imagine it should. And if you go into combat in the area that I just showed off earlier, where it was in the 40s, they're now like the worst frame rate is like in the mid 60s or so during that combat. This is one of the heaviest CPU areas of the game. That's why I chose it. And basically and the frame times look a lot better this time around. So God of War Ragnarok, it is getting there. There's still like one or two things that I think need to be looked at. Like the ultra wide performance is kind of the last thing that I mentioned in my review that hasn't been ticked off, as well as the missing ray traced cube maps, which I do not know if and when they are coming at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, the Zen 2 thing is curious to me because obviously the source code they would have been optimized for that particular CPU architecture. So yeah, that was a bit of an eye-opener. The 100% differential between the architectural shift there was, I'd say, unexpected. But it's great to see that effectively almost all of your critiques of the game have now actually been fixed. And as you say,
yes,
the game was actually in pretty good shape to begin with.
Right. It was like, I don't know, like when I look at them and the team that they are of just 4 core engineers plus a little bit of help from Sony Santa Monica for QA and oversight, I don't see that as a very large team where I imagine very easily things could fall through the cracks because it's just 4 people trying to cover every single base between UI and getting GPU and CPU scaling right everywhere. And not every test configuration is going to be tested as a result and put right in the place where it should be. So I'm more forgiving of games that have a smaller scope, even though I think perhaps Sony should give the game a bigger scope, right? That has nothing to do with the developers, though. That's everything about publishers.
Absolutely. Okay, that's good stuff. Any final notes on this? I mean, I'm really quite happy with the way the ports turned out in the end, and there is, I guess, it's slightly disappointing that there are any cutbacks at all versus a console version, but it kind of it does scale nicely in performance terms, I guess.
Yeah, now on modern GPUs, modern CPUs, it scales more in line with where it should than it did before, for sure. I mean, I haven't done any sort of PS5 versus PC testing, but it is on the like lesser great side of that scale, from what I understand from reading people online who've done that, using like for like settings that I've derived in my review, which I originally didn't do, but maybe now that's something I can do. That we've got a port that is more in line visually with where it should be.
Yeah, I'm just curious that there's going to be a PS5 Pro update to this, because where do they go? I mean, maybe to SSR, what? I don't know.
It's a weird one because like it's already pretty high res and it's using like TAAU from 1440p-ish resolutions or higher.
Yeah.
And it looks really good even in the performance mode there on PS5. I don't know. Higher res, I would have loved to have seen them use like real ray tracing there instead of just cube map tracing, like actually like dynamic objects and things with like, you know, the world geometry with textures. That would be better.